Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Maletsky. I'm the statewide wolf specialist for Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I'm here today to talk with you about the Wolf Conservation Management 2019 Annual Wolf Report. And each year we look at wolf recovery and how wolves are doing in the state, and we do a bunch of survey effort at the beginning of the year to look at where the wolves are in their state of recovery. And we look at all the management actions and all the different things that happen for wolf management in Washington from the previous year. And we compile all that information into our annual wolf report. And so it's that time of year where we've got that information compiled and we're looking to share that with the public. And normally I'd give a presentation to the Fish and Wildlife Commission and share that information live with those folks, and then also do a bunch of talks around the state to share this information. But due to the COVID-19 restrictions and the stay home, stay healthy things that are going on, here I sit in front of my computer to share this information with you today. Hope you're staying home, staying healthy as well, and we can get through this all together. So with that, we'll jump in to the talk and kind of give you an update of what's happening. So wolves have been recolonizing Washington since about 2008. They were originally extirpated in the 1930s with the European settlement as they moved across. And things have changed a little bit. There were a few reports early on in the 2000s, and then the first pack established in 2008 with the Lookout Pack. And then again with the Diamond Pack, and the pack started showing up on the landscape. And so we've been following that recolonization and that recovery of wolves since then, and each year we give this update. And so those wolves have naturally come in. They've walked into Washington on their own accord from BC, from Idaho, from Montana, from Oregon, and those places. And then as packs have established in Washington, they breed and have pups, and those pups grow up and disperse and create packs of their own as well. And so we're starting to slowly see that recovery go in Washington, and been following that for the last number of years. So wolves are federally listed in Washington in the western 2/3 of the state. So the eastern 1/3 is part of the Northern Rocky Mountain distinct population segment, and that was established 2007. And then they were delisted in 2011 federally in the eastern 1/3 of the state. And so there's no federal recovery requirements east of Highway 97 and in that eastern 1/3. There was a proposed rule to delist wolves federally on the 15th of March in 2019. However, that has not moved that much further from the proposed rule. So the western 2/3 of the state still remains federally listed. And so, however, the statewide wolves are endangered, and so that we manage wolves under the Wolf Conservation and Management Plan, which was established in 2011. And there's 3 recovery areas in that and a series of delisting requirements, as well as a ton of other information in that plan. And so with that, the 3 recovery regions are established so that we want to see wolves return as self-sustaining populations over a significant portion of their range. And so as one area starts to fill in and reach capacity of wolves, that helps feed the other recovery regions and allows them to grow and wolves to expand through much of their former range in Washington state. And so wolves are managed both from where it's a co-management with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, State Department of Fish and Wildlife, and our tribal co-managers, that we gather this information and share this information with the public. And so the wolf plan has 4 main objectives in it. We want to restore self-sustaining wolf populations. We want to maintain healthy ungulate populations. We want to manage wolf and livestock interactions. We want to really minimize the effects that wolves have on someone's livelihood and them making a living. And so we put a lot of energy and effort towards that. And we want to develop a public understanding and promote coexistence of wolves. There's a lot of information out about wolves, and some of it's factual and some of it's not really. And, there's a lot of sources out there that people go to for that information. And so we want to put out good information that's factual and based on the ecology of the species and the true numbers of what's happening out there, and help people to understand wolves better and other wildlife better, so that they can coexist, and everybody can be out there, and all the animals still have a place to be as well. So in the wolf plan, there's a definition for a pack, and that's 2 wolves traveling together in a defined territory, 2 or more wolves. And then our metric for recovery is successful breeding pairs, which means it's a male and female wolf that raise 2 or more pups until December 31st of a given year. And that successful breeding pairs is kind of our recovery, one of our recovery metrics for the wolf plan, to determine whether wolves are successful, or whether we've reached our recovery goals in each of the different recovery regions. We have metrics on successful breeding pairs. And so to monitor wolves, really one of the big keys is the reports from the public, and whether somebody has remote cameras out, whether hunting, whether it's just backyard remote cameras, or whether they're out hiking or cross-country skiing or hunting, or just enjoying the backcountry on their horse. If you see tracks, if you see sign of wolves, if you see wolves, grab a picture if you can. Take pictures of the tracks with something to measure them by the side. And you can report them on the wolf observations reporting tool on our website. And that's a great way for us. Wolves can be a needle in a haystack, especially if they're recolonizing a new area they haven't been. And so these reports from the public give us a starting place of where to search and where to look for that sign to find these. We might also get a call on a depredation that somebody thinks might have been a wolf, or you might see an injured wolf, or a wolf that got hit by a car, or something like that. And please report those things, because that can help guide us to where there may be another new pack or wolves on the landscape. And so once we find out those reports, and we have surveys going to find them as well, but then we'll put up remote cameras and we'll look for tracks and other sign in the wintertime and during the summer. And if we find a new pack, we might go in there and try and catch them. And we use ground trapping in the spring and summer, to catch wolves once the temperatures are above freezing, and there's a bunch of caveats to it, but we can use these traps, which are rubber padded. They're offset to not cut off circulation in the wolf's foot, and we check them multiple times a day, depending on temperature of outside air and things, and activity in the area. And so we'll do these things to try and catch a wolf, and we'll put a collar on them, and we can follow and find out about that pack and where they roam, and use it in the wintertime to help figure out how many wolves are in each of those packs. And so ground trapping is something we can use when we don't have a collar in a pack. We can use that to catch it and put that first collar in. And in the wintertime, sometimes we'll use a helicopter, and that's an opportunity for us to go in, and some of these collars, they run on batteries, and sometimes those batteries go dead, or we just want to try and get another wolf in that pack collared with a different type of collar that might last longer, or for some other reason. And so, helicopter captures are only in the wintertime, and generally we need to have a collar in the pack in order to use the helicopter to go in and try and catch other wolves or recollar that animal, because that's how we find the pack in the winter. Just flying with a helicopter is not a good tool to just go get a collar in a pack. It makes it really tough with how timbered Washington is. Helicopter captures are also really snow and weather dependent. Washington, like I mentioned, is really heavily timbered with small openings out there where these wolves live, and we need deep snow to kind of slow them down, so we have time to get in and get a dart in a wolf before it runs back into the trees. And sometimes we have really inclement weather in the wintertime, and so it's not a perfect tool. And anytime you're flying in a helicopter down low, and certainly in and through trees, there's an inherent risk to doing this stuff. So we really focus our efforts on where we use a helicopter to do this type of work, and get the work done that we need to do. But it's also very costly to do this type of work as well. And so we try and do it as efficiently and as effectively as we can. And so we can also get counts of wolves from the helicopter. That's where we can start getting our annual counts in the wintertime when we do that. But we also, we don't necessarily need collars on wolves to get pack counts and to do the monitoring work and the management work that we need to do. Collars can help in certain instances, but they aren't always necessary. And in packs that we don't have collars, we still use remote cameras, and we'll go out and do track surveys. We'll spend time on snowmobiles and snowshoes and cross-country skis and things to get into areas and cut wolf tracks, and then we can follow those wolf tracks for as long as we need to. A lot of times wolves will step in their own tracks, and so 3 wolves traveling in a line might look like one wolf, and then you follow them for a half mile or a mile, and they'll split out, and you'll see all 3 wolves separate out. And when we do this repeatedly over the course of the winter in each of these packs, when we need to get a good count, and so that helps. That repetition helps get a better number for our annual survey at the end of the year. And so our population monitoring, when I talk about captures, last year we had a pretty good year capturing wolves. We actually captured and handled 19 wolves from 14 packs in 2019. And so it was actually 16 new wolves in that, and 3 were recaptures. But one of the pups was too small to actually put a collar on, so we didn't collar that individual. We just let him go. And over the course of the year, because we had wolves collared going into 2019, we actually monitored 28 different wolves from 16 packs. So we had a collar in almost 2/3 of the packs in 2019. But unfortunately, wolf populations are dynamic, and wolves disperse, and collars malfunction, and wolves die for various reasons. And so there's lots of things that affect how many collars we can keep out at any given time. And so by the end of the year, we're actually down to monitoring just 12 wolves from 10 different packs. And we'll continue this process each year. We'll do more ground trapping this year and things to get more wolves collared. Like I said, we try and focus our energy on the top priorities of where we want to use collars to help with management and getting numbers and finding out new things about new packs and research that we have going on. Those are kind of our top priorities, and interactions with livestock are certainly a priority to follow that and keep up on that. And so, we focus where we're going to put that energy, but we certainly don't need a collar in every pack to make that happen. And so our annual counts, when we actually go out and do surveys, we've got a number of ways. The ground surveys, like I mentioned earlier, we get counts doing the helicopter capture work, but we also fly in a fixed wing aircraft, and we usually fly a little above 500 feet above ground level in the fixed wing, and we can pick up wolves on telemetry when we have a collar in the pack, and we can fly over and we circle above, and we can actually get counts on those numbers. This happens to be a picture I took from the Lookout Pack territory in February 2020. And in the black circles, you can see 5 individual wolves that we were able to count from the air. And so sometimes it takes, multiple surveys to actually get good solid counts, multiple flights in each of these packs. But generally we can get a pretty good idea of the number of wolves. They don't always travel together. Sometimes they might be in timber, they might be in a really deep draw or something like that. And so, by multiple flights, we eventually get to good solid counts on each of these packs. And so this is a map of the distribution of the packs that we have in 2019. Some of the things, it doesn't necessarily change much year to year. As far as the packs tend to stay in the same areas where they are. There's a lot of site fidelity. I mentioned that last year, talking about that between years in the report. But, so it helps us when we go out and do these surveys. We kind of know which animals, which pack is utilizing an area, and we can get a count on those individuals. And that territorial nature of them keeps the packs kind of separated out on the landscape. So the red circle is the Diopsid Creek Pack territory. We did surveys in there, and we did find evidence of at least one wolf utilizing that area over the course of the winter. However, we just could never document more than one. utilizing that area. That doesn't mean that's not, that couldn't still be a pack, but we just didn't have evidence to say that it was a pack this year based on our definitions. And so it kind of falls off our list of packs, but we're still monitoring that area, and we still know there's a wolf in that area. The Sullivan Creek pack is a new pack this year in the Okanagan County, south of Loop Loop pack territory. There were 2 wolves that we saw multiple times over the winter. They're traveling together in that territory. And then another one that came back. So we removed the OPT pack due to some livestock interactions, and we removed that whole pack. But this winter, when we did surveys again, there was another group of 3 wolves utilizing that area. And so, when you have good habitat and there's deer and elk and good places for wolves to be, they're going to reestablish those areas. And so this is probably a new group of 3 wolves. We think it may have actually been the Sherman pack that shifted north, because we did surveys in December and located 2 wolves in the Sherman pack territory, but then couldn't locate them the rest of the winter. And so it makes sense that they may have shifted north into the old OPT Profanity Peak territory. And we opted to name that pack a new name, so called the Kettle Pack this year. And so the rest of the map looks pretty similar than previous years. This is a breakdown of those packs as we look at minimum numbers in each of those packs. Our average pack size is right around 4 to 5 wolves per pack, which has been consistent to the last couple of years. One thing that changes this year, the Confederated Tribes of the Caldwell Reservation considers their wolf numbers and wolves to be recovered on tribal lands. And so they decided to allocate resources to other areas and other things on the reservation and on their tribal lands. And so they don't have specific counts on successful breeding pairs. They're doing it in other ways. And so with different methodology, they aren't directly comparable in numbers. And so you'll see there's no successful breeding pairs for the Caldwell tribe packs. And the numbers were just gathered kind of incidentally by trappers and hunters and public that are out observing those animals. And so with that different methodology, they may not be quite as comparable to the survey efforts that we put forth to get these counts every year. And so we broke all those out for this year and for the previous years so that you can see how things have changed from year to year with and without those numbers together. And so, we had 8 successful breeding pairs on the WDFW managed areas. And we had 21 mortalities that we knew of this year. 9 of those were lethal removal from livestock interactions. 6 were tribal harvest from the Spokane tribes and from the Caldwell Confederated tribes. And we had 1 that was killed by a cougar. We had 1 of unknown causes, and had a few other mortalities in there. And then we had 5 wolves that actually dispersed from their natal packs this year, and they were collared, and we got to see where they went. And so we'll get more into that. And then we had 2 wolves missing, and that just means that, it could have been collar malfunctions. We had some issues with some of the collars we put out. Could have been other things, but they just kind of go down as unknowns right now. In the North Cascades recovery region, again, we had that new pack, Sullivan Creek. It was just 2 animals. Hopefully they'll breed this coming year. We don't know yet. We had 2 breeding pairs, the Lookout pack and Teanaway pack. Again, our average pack size is roughly about 4 to 5 wolves per pack. And so we had 2 successful breeding pairs in the North Cascades recovery region and 22 wolves, and 1 known dispersal, 1 from the Loop Loop pack that dispersed this year. For overall status, we had 10 successful breeding pairs. Again, the Confederated Tribes of the Caldwell Reservation didn't collect those metrics this year and weren't able to share those with us. And so that's about 20% of the packs that would normally be included in that mix that isn't in there. So not super concerned about numbers just because of the difference in comparison of the methodologies this year. Minimum count ended up being 145. But that again includes the 2 different methodologies used to get counts. And then 21 known mortalities. We had 6 known wolves disperse statewide, and we had 14 dead livestock and 11 injured that were confirmed to be related to wolves this year. And so our trends, looking at that in figures, overall our wolf population is increasing by about 11%. And you can see the differences of the Confederated Tribes of the Caldwell Reservation in blue and WDFW managed areas in yellow, and the differences there. And so we do still see an increase in the number of wolves, which is good, and that's promising for wolf recovery in Washington. With our successful breeding pairs, that's difficult to compare without the same methodology all the way across the state. But we had ended up with 10 successful breeding pairs this year. Still kind of going along. We've kind of reached capacity of wolves in the eastern recovery region, and so I wouldn't expect there to be a big increase in those areas, kind of moving along. And in the North Cascades, we ended up with a new pack there, but the Dapson Creek pack, we aren't sure necessarily what's happened there. We just could find evidence of one wolf in that area. So some of those packs we'll just continue to monitor and see where it goes. And the trend in the number of wolf packs, again, like I said, somewhat of a leveling off of wolves in the eastern recovery region. And then in the number of packs in the Cascades, again, it's kind of a leveling, but still starting to slowly trickle up, and we'll see what this coming year has. We just keep monitoring that as it grows. It's not growing quite as fast as I would typically expect it in the North Cascades, but I'm not, there's a number of reasons that could be. And then the known mortalities this year, you compare those numbers to the total number of wolves, and yeah, the number of wolves is going up on the landscape, so we'd expect to see more mortalities throughout the year. We're still seeing an increase in wolf numbers and still seeing an increase in population, and so the mortalities certainly can affect that, but the speed of that growth, but we're still seeing that growth, so that's still promising in the long run. And so the wolf mortalities, or not wolf mortalities, but the wolf dispersal, some really cool stuff this year on wolf dispersal. We actually had a wolf leave from Carpenter Ridge, and it went roughly over 900 miles into eastern Montana, and pretty amazing to see the ability of these wolves to move across the landscape. In about a month and a half's time, a wolf made a trek over some pretty steep, rugged country and settled in the Front Range there in Montana. And we had one leave from Goodman Meadows and go quite a ways up into BC. We had one leave from Stranger Pack territory and take a dip down towards the Air Force Base down in Spokane and made a loop back to its natal territory and then scoot over to Idaho. And so had one leave from Loop Pack and go actually into western Washington over by Diapsid Creek for a short time, and then it looped back around and ended up in BC. And so some pretty neat movements to see from these wolves, and just kind of when somebody tells me they have a wolf or a wolf sighting in just about any part of the state, it's certainly possible looking at the movement ability of these animals. So with a population summary, when we just look at WDFW managed lands, because of the difference in methodologies with the Confederated Tribes of the Caldwell Reservation, I just pulled out, well, what are we doing on the areas that we manage across the state, and how are wolves doing? And so we had an increase of 11 wolves this year. It was an 11% increase from last year. And 26 known packs, 10 successful breeding pairs, and overall growth rate since wolves have started to recolonize Washington is about 23% right now. And so one of the promising things this year is only about 14% of the packs, typically about 20% of the packs involved in interactions with livestock, but this year it was down to 14%. So that means 86% of those packs are just doing what wolves do on the landscape and not interacting with livestock at all. And so that's a promising number, and hopefully that's a tribute to working with producers and getting a lot of those non-lethals out there and working. And so as we start talking about that, what are some of the things that we're doing there? And so we've got a number of wildlife conflict specialists all around the state, and they're working and coordinating with producers, livestock producers all around the state. We've got cost share contracts to share the costs of some of these things, whether it's buying flattery or helping with fencing or helping assist with the cost of a range rider to protect their livestock and other deterrence measures that they could be doing. And so, if they want to work, our conflict specialists would love to work with folks to help them understand some of the ways that they can keep their livestock safe and how we can help out there. In areas where sometimes the wolves just pick up a behavior that, find out that cattle are there and available, and we end up with more depredations occurring on a single pack or from a single pack. And so in order to stop that, sometimes we have to go and use lethal removal in those cases. And so that's an option that we have in the areas that are under state management. That's not necessarily an option under the federal side in the western 2/3 of the state. And we also do have a compensation program that's available to producers. If wolves kill their livestock, we can compensate for that. And so one of the big tools that we use is range riding. And, range riders can be out there monitoring the behavior of the pack, keeping cattle within the allotment and the grazing areas that they should be, keeping calves from straying from the group, and making sure they aren't vulnerable to predation and attack from wolves. And just really just kind of being stewards of those animals while they're out on public grazing allotments and even larger private pastures. And there's a bunch of other tools that we can use. Probably one of the biggest things, we coin sanitation, but that's when livestock die. A lot of times they get drugged to the back of the pasture or kind of stuck there, but they still become an attractant. It's amazing how far these animals can smell those dead animals, and they'll come in and that's a free meal to a wolf or a coyote or a cougar. And so they're going to come in from a long ways away to feed on that dead livestock, and it just puts the live calves and lambs and livestock in jeopardy because those animals are right there, and it just gives them an opportunity to attack healthy live animals. And so by getting rid of those carcasses and burying them or getting them to a landfill or places that they aren't becoming an attractant to carnivores, it's going to keep your herd healthier and safer. Calving and lambing close to a residence or keeping them in a little bit more confined pasture, you can check on them a lot easier every day. We can use things like flattery and other tools to keep carnivores out if it's a smaller pasture. And delaying turnout till those calves are a little bit bigger. Not putting them out on rangeland before they get to 200 pounds. That'll keep those animals a little safer too out on the range. And utilizing, of course, range riders and the sheep herders, different types of fencing, fox lights. There's a bunch of techniques out there to keep those animals safe. And so we definitely encourage those practices to help minimize interactions with wolves and other carnivores. And so we also have the Wolf Advisory Group assisted us in putting a guidance document together, which is our wolf livestock interaction protocol. And we use this protocol to basically, it highlights a lot of those non-lethals that we could be using, but it also kind of highlights a step-by-step process of when those non-lethal tools aren't being as effective as they used to be, and wolves start getting this behavior of killing livestock. It kind of gives an example of what the chronic depredations would look like and what are those timelines. And, it gives guidance on when the department may or may not act on lethal removal. And so it's a guidance document, but there's a lot of nuances to wolf management. And, we try and follow the document as best we can and give people an idea when things are going to happen. But, some of those nuances, it's not always that cut and dry. And so this is just one of those tools that we use so the public knows when and why things are happening. And so if we want to look at the actual numbers on packs and depredating livestock, these are the known packs that we had for each of the years, and then the packs that actually depredated. And this year we only had 4 out of the 26 packs that had interactions with livestock. And so, the other 86% of those packs were just doing what wolves do, and that's a good thing. And it's down a little bit from the year before or the couple years before. And so we'd like to see that trend continue. We don't know if it will, but certainly like to see that number lower. And then this is wolf-caused livestock losses by year. So these are the number of cattle or sheep that were killed by wolves for each of those years. And so you can see there was a little bit of an increase in 2019 of the number killed. We had 14 cattle that were killed by wolves this past year. But of the over 1 million livestock out there, 14 is still a pretty small number statewide, and shouldn't be taken lightly, but it should be put in perspective. And in 2019, wolf calls livestock lost by month. So this explains kind of the times of the year that we've had those interactions. It primarily occurs when wolves and livestock are in close proximity on the public grazing allotments, on DNR allotments or Forest Service allotments, or even WDFW. We have cattle allotments on our lands as well. And so we do a lot of things with range riding and places to keep livestock and wolves from interacting, but it primarily occurs in the summer. You'll see that there were 3 cattle that were killed in January. Those were 3 cattle that were left out on the range after all the other cattle were collected and brought back to private lands. And those cattle were stuck up in the mountains in the snow in the wintertime, and they were very vulnerable to predation. And so that's kind of that anomaly that sticks out there. Hopefully we can do more to get those cattle off of those range allotments and make sure we pick up those stragglers. But every once in a while that does happen as well. And so I'd also like to talk a little bit about wolves and humans. Wolves are usually afraid of people, and they avoid being around them most of the time at all costs. There haven't been any documented cases of humans being bitten or attacked or killed by wild wolves in Washington, or for most of the West, for that matter. It's just an incredibly rare event. We have had folks stumble into a rendezvous site and get barked at by wolves. That's basically them saying, hey, my pups are here. I can't move them that quick. I just need you to leave. And so a wolf will bark at you to say, hey, please get out of my area. Take that advice. Back up, back away, and just leave the area, and you probably won't have any issues. Keep wolves wild by reducing attractants. Never feed wolves. Don't leave food at campsites. Again, bone piles, carcass dumps, things like that on the back of your pasture. Bury that stuff. Clean that stuff up. Don't attract wolves coming in, and it'll save you a lot of troubles in the future. Securing pet food and garbage at your residence. If your dog stays out at night, keep it in a predator-proof kennel or in a fence at night. Don't be feeding deer or turkeys or other wildlife at your residence. If you congregate prey species at your house, the carnivores have to come in to get them and eat. If that's where all the prey are hanging, you're just luring those animals. And if it's not you that's having the problem, it might be your neighbor. So please be considerate about and not feeding wildlife. Wildlife doesn't need to be fed. There's lots of food out there for them, and they do just fine without that attractant and getting habituated to people. And so, and then also, just good livestock husbandry practices. If there's a place to bring your sheep in at night or keep animals secure at night, certainly chickens, things like that, please do those things, because that's going to stop interactions in the long run. And then if you do see a wolf, certainly enjoy it from a distance. If you have a dog running around, please leash your dog. Don't allow it to interact with wolves. And then, if you stumble into a den or a rendezvous site, that's an area where they can't move those pups out very quickly. And, they may just bark at you or kind of do a bark howl and say, hey, leave this spot. Just take their advice. They're communicating with you. They aren't attacking or threatening. They're just saying, hey, we're here, please vacate this spot. And so it's a good thing to do. If you feel threatened, stay calm, don't run. You can yell, you can use a loud voice to scare them away. Make yourself look bigger, kind of stand tall. So you can throw rocks or sticks if you want to. Keep direct eye contact with the animal and just back away slowly and just leave the area. The best advice I can give on that. And so we try and do a lot of outreach every year. We just updated our website. We've been trying to do more on social media and explain a lot of this stuff and a lot of the activities and things going on. And we have things like the Wolf Advisory Group, which I'll get to in a second. And we do a lot of daily interactions, both email and phone calls, and newspaper articles and just TV outlet things. We do formal presentations. I give talks at school groups and sportsmen's groups and cattlemen groups and conservation groups. Whoever wants to find out more information about this stuff, we're happy to give those talks and share what we know. And so our Wolf Advisory Group is a group of private citizens that have come together they have a very diverse background, whether it be livestock or hunters or recreationists or conservation-oriented folks, private citizens that are just interested in wolf stuff. And we try and navigate. Wolf issues can be very contentious, and there's a lot of tough things to navigate when managing wolves, and we want to have a very balanced approach, or as balanced as we can make it, to still conserve wolves and allow them to recover on the landscape and do well, but also protect people's livelihoods and the things we need to do there. And so just having the Citizen Advisory Board to provide guidance and give us some direction there, and bounce these things off of and get ideas and support from them has been really helpful. They've met 4 times in 2019. They've held 3 conference calls to discuss this stuff, and they've provided a lot of guidance on our livestock management actions that we've done and that livestock management protocol. And they're starting to discuss, where are we going to be when wolves do reach recovery? We got to have a plan and a post-recovery plan to look at how we're going to manage wolves at that point. And is that going to be similar to how we do it now, or what are the differences going to look like? What does a post-recovery look like for wolves in Washington? And none of that's been decided yet. So, wolf management expenditures, it's a costly deal to manage wolves on a statewide level. And we try and do a lot of work to prevent interactions with livestock, wolves and livestock. And so we've got the damage prevention cooperative agreements with producers and contracted range riders. We actually fund a bunch of contracted range riders to help assist and protect livestock out on the range during the summer. And then we also pay for livestock that have been killed by wolves. If we do the investigation and determine them killed, they have opportunity to get compensation. Producers have opportunity to get compensation for that. And then if we do have reoccurring depredations and they meet, that definition of reoccurring, and we think that those depredations will continue or likely continue, we may need to remove some wolves from pack, or in the case of OPT, we removed a whole pack this last year, and there's a lot of cost to that. And then we have other management research activities to buy collars and the planes and the helicopters, and all that stuff costs money. And so our wolf management costs were about $1.5 million this past year. So some of the research I talked about, there's a bunch of ongoing research happening on wolves in the state, and I try and compile all that stuff so folks know some of the things that have happened and where they can find some of this information. And so there was a modeling habitat suitability and connectivity masters that finished up this last year. We've got the Predator-Prey Project, which there's a number of professors and students at University of Washington that are working on the Predator-Prey Project up in the Chewelah-Colville area in Northeast Washington and up in the Okanagan, looking at the interactions of deer and elk and wolves and cougars and coyotes and bobcats and all the species out there, and how they interact. And each of those graduate students and the research scientists are kind of taking a piece of that puzzle, and they each have a different focus. But when you start putting all those pieces together, you kind of get a good view of the overall dynamics of those ecosystems. And then there's other studies, like Sam Wasser's studies, Dr. Wasser's studies at UW, and he was allocated some funding from the legislature to look for wolves in the South Cascades. And so he's been doing work on that with his cat sniffing dogs. And Story Warren is doing work from the University of Montana for her undergrad and looking at the influence of gray wolves on interspecies movements and patterns in the Teanaway Pack territory. So, we do a lot of work, and during the recovery phase and each year to do the annual report to get information on our minimum count of wolves in the state. But we're also looking into the future of how we might do this more cost effectively and, different resources, similar to what the Confederated Tribes of the Caldwell Reservation, they've reached their recovery goals and they've shifted how they're getting that information. And so we're looking at other tools as well. And Trent Rosine is a wolf biologist for Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, but he's also doing his master's on kind of the methods of long-term monitoring of wolves. And one of the things, as part of the Predator Prey Project, they've got a camera grid system out in these 2 study areas, and they're looking at all the different habitat types and surveying for multiple species with a remote camera grid out there. And over time, they can look at detection levels and occupancy and distribution of all these different species. Well, at the same time, Trent is using these bioacoustic devices at these same spots, and they're looking at the effectiveness of determining which areas are occupied by these animals and which areas aren't, and which tools are more effective at detection rates and occupancy estimates in these areas. And so they can look at it on multiple seasons. They can look at it at multiple scales. At what scale, how many of these recorders do you need to have out and cameras do you need to have out to get the occupancy and detection rates? And so they also have the bioacoustics parts also have a really neat function in the sense that they can look at determining daily howling rates of wolves. We can look at, actually, if you've got 3 or 4 recorders out there and you get a howl somewhere on the landscape, you can look at localizing where those howls came from and get activity centers of where rendezvous sites might be or den sites might be. You can get counts of adults and pups. And so this is all in its research phase, and there's a lot of work that needs to go in to figure out how to get this information out of the recorders and tie it all in. And they can look at identifying lone wolves or other species, owls and bugs and coyotes and cows. All these different things make noise in the woods, and so using machine learning to pull out the wolf howls, you got to train the machines to actually find wolf howls. What does a wolf howl sound like? What's the difference between adults and pups? And so there's a lot of research that has to go on and a lot of stuff to figure out on how to analyze that information. And these are huge data sets that come in, and the recording devices that we put out, the battery life is fairly short-lived, but they're cheap to put out there. So there's all these different nuances we got to figure out. And so thankfully Trent's working on that, but maybe our ways of monitoring wolves will change here in the future too. Probably not for a few years and perhaps not till after recovery, but it's good to start that process of learning new techniques and finding new techniques now so that we can adapt as we move forward. And so I appreciate everybody listening in today, and I hope I answered a lot of your questions. Probably have a bunch more. You can always reach out to the department and ask your questions, and I can try and get back to you that way. Hope everybody's staying safe and healthy, and thank you for taking the time to listen.